So now I'd like to look briefly at a couple of articles on the Euthyphro. The first is by Geach, and Geach's article on the Euthyphro is, a classic article. Lots has been written in reaction to it. We'll see that one of the reactions by a fellow named Santas in a bit. But Geach it's a very rich and fertile discussion, so I'm certainly not going to go through it in complete detail. Part of what I want to do here is I'm giving a sort of a general kind of quick overview of it, and your task is to pick up on certain sections in it, analyze those with the knowledge that you've gained about the Euthyphro from the series of lectures, the video lectures that I've given already on the Euthyphro. But this is just to help ease you into Geach's discussion, but you're going to be taking up some things on your own. So this is... Geach's discussion follows in a very rich and fertile tradition of authors who have examined the Euthyphro from a number of angles and have found it problematic. And we saw a little bit when I pointed out the possibility of a fallacy in it, namely the false dichotomy fallacy. Well, in that spirit of spotting questionable reasoning in it, here we have Geach. He thinks, right, that there is a kind of fallacy in the way of thinking of the Euthyphro. And now that we've studied fallacies, we know that there are things that can look like very good arguments, but they're problematic. And not all fallacies are bad, but and they're not bad all the time. So we have to be sensitive to context as well and keep our wits about us. So much of it has this tradition of finding the Euthyphro problematic, in addition to its discussions that involve the issue of divine command theory that I've already talked about. Much of it has to do with the problem of gaining knowledge and the notion of how do you gain it? Can you gain it through examples? And Socrates is very critical of examples being returned as answers to questions of definition. So we saw that in the Euthyphro, and again, as I mentioned, you find it in the Theaetetus. You find it in a variety of places. Socrates asks for a definition, he gets examples, and he says, not good enough. So but it is a large question to think about, a large and important philosophical, epistemological question. Can you gain knowledge through examples? And if you do, or are you gaining? Are there different kinds of knowledge? Is it better or worse or whatnot? And considering, of course, in mathematics, that knowledge is not really a matter of learning through examples. You don't really understand, let's say mathematically speaking, you don't understand what a circle is simply by looking at lots of circles. Rather, you have a very straightforward definition, about some sort of fixed point and a set of equidistant points from that fixed point, or maybe some sort of mathematical equation, doing a little bit of, sort of coordinate geometry or something. But it's not the case that you learn, really get your knowledge of circles simply by looking at a bunch of them. So there's a lot of interesting and very deep philosophical problems going on that the Euthyphro indeed touches on. So a couple of pages into the essay, Geach's essay that is on the Euthyphro, he says that Socrates makes two assumptions, A and B. And accepting these assumptions that Socrates, if Geach is right, that Socrates makes these assumptions, if you accept these, as he says Socrates does, then you're committing what Geach calls the Socratic fallacy, right? So the question is Geach right? Does Socrates actually make these assumptions? And it goes like this. If you, the first assumption is if you know that you're correctly predicating a term T, like you're using, the Hossein or something correctly, right? Then you must know what it is, a criterion for it, right? So if you're using the Hossein correctly, you should be able to say, this is what it is, right? This is a criterion for it, or be able to articulate some kind of definition for it. And you can't get at the meaning of it, of the Hossein via examples, right? Not only you can't get there, and also think about it. If you already had knowledge of the Hossein, you wouldn't need examples. So you can't get there either. They're either useless for helping you or unnecessary, because if you have a definition of them, of the Hosea, and you don't need examples anyways. So this is now. So if you accept these, basically B does follow from A. But if we just say that Socrates puts them out, seems to accept them according to Geach, and embracing them leads to all kinds of problems. So this is the good. Geach is not praising this. He's excuse me. He's condemning Socrates for these accepting these two propositions, because he's saying this actually makes it creates the Socratic fallacy. So what you're trying to do now in studying this paper of Geach's, Geach is to realize that, and Geach points this out, that the Socratic fallacy is a fallacy because we know lots of things without being able to give big definitions of them. So often we can apply terms like, like, don't ask me what art is, but I know it when I see it, right? Well, according to this, that wouldn't be the case. If you can't tell me what art is, then you don't know what you're seeing. You don't know what you're talking about. You shouldn't even talk about it. You shouldn't even be able to say, I can. So in this version, I can't identify an object of art unless I can articulate it, what it means to be an object of art. So, and Geach is saying that's what Socrates is telling us, and Geach is saying that's just not true. We know lots of things. Again, many things we do know, we can't provide good definitions for, but that doesn't mean we don't know, right? Maybe we shouldn't talk about it as if we can talk about it. Maybe that's the problem. We can't really talk about it, but it's not the case that we have no idea, right? So this is Geach's main point in this paper. And he thinks also this can cause great harm. For instance, and Geach gives us an example. He says, and if imagine a young person coming up to Socrates, and Socrates says to this young person, what's injustice? What do you think it is? Asks for a definition for andike, right? The not just, the injustice. And a young person, says something like, well, being unjust is like swindling or something like that. And then Socrates says, what's swindling? And let's say this young person can't define what swindling is, and then, and what Geach says is this could undermine, almost being another accuser of Socrates, is Socrates could be undermining basic decent moral behavior, or the possibility of it, by creating this doubt, right? And saying, well, geez, now if I can't define what swindling is, maybe swindling isn't bad. Maybe it isn't part of, or maybe swindling isn't sort of opposed. Maybe it's okay to swindle people. And Geach says, some of Socrates' former students went off and got involved in the 30 Tyrants, shall we say, government of Athens that happened after Athens lost the Peloponnesian War to the Spartans. So, in other words, make a long story short, that this Socratic fallacy could actually have very negative moral implications for this. And so what Geach is trying to do in the next couple of pages, and it's pretty tough reading, but I want you to have a good go at it, is to look at how Geach wants to look at how Socrates, in the context of the Euthyphro, actually commits this fallacy, right? So he wants to build the case that, yeah, this is going on in the Euthyphro. And so what you need to do, and so we're looking at about Stephanus numbers 6 to about 12. So think of about 6 to 12 in the Euthyphro, of where Geach is making the case that, yeah, the Socratic fallacy, that's going on in the Euthyphro. And what you want to do is try to come to some understanding of Geach's interpretation, right? That Socrates in the Euthyphro, commits the Socratic fallacy. That's really what Geach's interpretation is. That's what's going on in the bulk of this paper. That what it is, this is the Socratic fallacy. It's got all these negative consequences. One is moral implications, a moral implication, if it'll make you bad. And but the main point is is Geach's analysis of the Euthyphro 6 to 12, in which he tries to say, yeah, that's actually where Socrates is committing the Socratic fallacy. So what you want to do is figure out how this little GI Geach's interpretation, how it comes to be, how he interprets the Euthyphro as embodying or expressing what he calls the Socratic fallacy. So it's a difficult slog, but that's an important aspect of what I'm preparing you to do now that we've gone through the Euthyphro and I've oriented you towards Geach. Your task is to take the next step and to figure out how this actually works and to try and put it into your own words.